Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mindy Crawford, Executive Director of Preservation Pennsylvania. Thank you for all joining us this afternoon. I want to put in a quick reminder that tonight is our Pennsylvania Historic Preservation Awards event. You can join it via Zoom or watch it through the Attendify platform. It starts at 4 o'clock, and it is a video of our 24 award recipients. If this were a normal year, we'd all be together at the statewide conference with the awards in Easton, but unfortunately, we are here coming to you virtually. I will also note before we get started that you can put your questions into the chat box that you see. Anytime they come to you, we will not pause for questions during the presentations, but Elizabeth Rera from the PA SHPO is here to monitor our questions, and she will come on at the end to ask them of our panelists. We're going to talk today about the power of small-scale incremental economic development and how programs such as the ones our panelists represent can totally transform a neighborhood, city, or a region, one project at a time. I've been working in the historic preservation field from the nonprofit perspective for almost 40 years. I was only 2 when I started. I can't even begin to calculate how many phone calls and emails I've gotten over the years saying that someone wants to start a business in a main street or buy a historic home, and they just don't know where to get started. The first question is, where do I get a grant? Where do I get a grant? These elusive grants that I have never known to actually exist, and I really don't know what to tell them. When the answer is no, a lot of times they just don't know what to do. And so having the passion to buy a historic building, to start a business on Main Street is not enough. They need some help in getting to know where to start. Our keynote speaker, Sarah Bronin, yesterday reminded us that we need to fight to keep those incentives, those financial incentives like the historic tax credit in place, so that we can have some help with projects, but those projects, the tax credits don't work for everyone, and there really aren't that many options. Today's panelists, however, are working at the local level with programs that have made a difference. We're going to explore ways to approach projects one at a time and how those efforts can grow into something amazing. My preservation career started in York as Executive Director of Historic York, where our first speaker, Josh Hankey, is based, and where I just learned David Kahley was born. So there is definitely a York connection here, and I apologize, Angie. Totally admitting my bias here, York has always been pretty progressive in their approach to historic preservation, and during my 24 years there, we made some amazing strides. I was no longer working in York when Josh got started there, and a few years ago I had the opportunity to take a tour with him to see all the work that Royal Square was doing, and it made me want to quit my job and head back to York to be part of the excitement. So let me now introduce our panelists. Josh Hankey is the president and CEO of Royal Square Development and Construction in York. Our second speaker is Angie Williamson. She's the director of Jumpstart Germantown. And then we'll hear from David Kahley, president and CEO of the Progress Fund based in Greensburg. So just another reminder before we get started, don't forget to put your questions in the chat and we'll come back later to answer them. So Josh, I will turn it over to you.
It looks like I'm not unmuting. Can you hear me? You can hear me, okay. All right, hello everyone. Good afternoon. As Mindy said, I'm the CEO of Royal Square Development and Construction. Sorry. My company to date has invested over $40 million in downtown York and renovated more than 50 properties downtown. I'm going to pull up my slideshow here for you. 1 second. Sorry. Okay, hopefully you can see this. So my story starts with growing up in York County. I grew up in Red Lion, actually, out in the sticks, in the cornfields. I knew I wasn't meant to be in the country. I was meant for more of an urban environment. And I had looked at York City. I thought maybe one day I'll move downtown, but York City, it just seemed that it didn't have much to offer for me. I remember driving downtown well, riding downtown in the back seat of my parents' car to visit our grandparents that lived downtown, and looking out the window and seeing a pretty deteriorated urban environment. Although I was always attracted to the beautiful architecture, there was these beautiful Victorian houses on the way into town. They were rather deteriorated, but I always thought, wouldn't it be amazing one day to be able to buy one of these properties and fix it up? Um, Also, the
Hey,
downtown had,
Josh, we can't hear you. I mean, we can't see your presentation.
you cannot see my presentation.
No, we cannot.
Okay. Let's see if I can get that to work for you here. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. This is different. So, yes, York City was in a deteriorated state. What little bit of retail was left downtown when I was growing up was in the process of shuttering, or in its last gasps. So in 1996, I graduated from high school, and I was thinking, I need to get out. I need to get out of York. And I actually joined the military, and I was hoping I would see the world through the military. And they stationed me in Baltimore. Not exactly my idea of seeing the world, but it was a lucky break in the long run, because I was stationed in Baltimore for 8 years. And during my time there, I decided I would buy an old house and fix it up, something I had always dreamed of. And I bought a 3-unit 1920s bungalow, fixed it up while I was living there, and things worked out very well with that. So I decided I would do that again, refinance the property, purchase another, actually brought on some investors, and started a very small construction business while I was still in the military. In 2005, I left the military and continued to purchase some small multi-unit properties in the Baltimore area and renovate them. But as I was doing this, I started thinking a lot about York City. I had seen some major revitalization happen in Baltimore between when I arrived there in 1997 and that time, 10 years later, essentially. And I would think of York City, and I would think, York is a small town. Why couldn't we make something like this happen in York? And I would talk to my friends about this, and they would say, "Oh, but the crime." But in Baltimore, when I first arrived in Baltimore, there were 5 murders a week on average. So, York City didn't look to have a major crime issue compared to that. So I thought, why can't we do something? So I cooked up a kind of a crazy idea, and that was I wanted to try to buy an entire city block in the central business district of York and make a difference, do something good for my community, and hopefully also, make some money as well. So I lucked out in 2007 and found uh, 4 properties almost in a row, all for sale on the 100 block of East King Street in the central business district. This is one block behind the Yorktown Hotel, 2 blocks off of the square. And this is where the Royal Square District was born. When I started buying properties on this block, it looked like this. Very deteriorated, sidewalks all broken up, no trees, facades, just not taken care of. And so my idea was I would buy these 4 properties, and I was able to get them for very cheap, $25,000, $26,000 a piece. And working myself with a couple other individuals, renovating these properties into something that I would want to live in. I was thinking an apartment that a young professional would want. Also, there was retail spaces on this block that were completely vacant at the time. I think the last one was an attorney's office that closed up the year that I started buying these properties. So over time, I was able to buy additional properties. The timing was right too. It was 2008, 2009, 2010, and this is the time when the real estate market was taking a big hit. And so investors were willing to sell their properties at inexpensive prices. So I was able to purchase them and renovate them. And I was working with a small crew and doing a lot of the work myself. So I was able to get something done for a pretty decent price. So this is what the block looks like now. So, sorry, as I'm renovating this block, the fifth property that I purchased was 116 East King Street. And this is a really important piece of the puzzle because when I purchased this property and renovated it, I had 5 college students approach me and said they would like to rent this house from me. And of course, my investors and I thought, is it a good idea to rent to 5 college students? Who knows? But what we in the end decided was that we should go ahead and roll the dice on that because we were thinking young professionals, and these are young people who are about to be professionals. And so they move in, and the next thing we know, they start having art shows. On First Fridays, they would move all of their furniture out of this place into the backyard, and they would have gallery shows, and they were showing local emerging artists, young artists, and they were getting 200 and 300 people to show up to these shows. So I decided we need to keep this going. So we actually started essentially bribing them to continue to have these shows. We would buy them paint for their gallery, would give them money off of their rent as long as they continued to have gallery shows. And eventually they approached me and they said, you know, we'd really like to start a nonprofit arts organization called the Parliament, and we don't know where to begin. Would you help us to develop that? So I agreed to that, and we created a 501c3. I joined as the treasurer on their board, and the Parliament Arts Organization was born. And this was such an important piece to the revitalization of this neighborhood because, and I saw this in Baltimore, when artists move in, they help to create a sense of community and pride through the arts and culture that they infuse into the community. And that's exactly what they did. And over time, what happened is we had artists or creatives approaching us and saying, I would like studio space, I would like gallery space. And it helped us to be able to lease up the other storefronts on the block and really rebrand the neighborhood as an arts neighborhood. So as we're working on King Street and all of this culture is starting to happen there, we're looking at Duke Street, which is the adjacent street, and saying, you know, this needs help too. And we really can't make this neighborhood something if we don't do something about Duke Street. So Duke Street looked like this at the time, also extremely deteriorated, many vacancies. There was a 5 and dime appliance shop where you could get your appliance along with roaches inside of it, if that's what you wanted. There was multiple other deteriorated buildings on this block. And I'll show you a map here to kind of orient you to things. So let's see, if you can see my cursor, we have the square of York City here, and then this that I have up so you can see it here is the southeast quadrant of the business district, Yorktown Hotel being 1 block away from Continental Square, and then 1 block south of that is the Royal Square District. So all of these very darkly colored property parcels are ones that we gained control over. You can see the red indicating the square. And by the way, we named it Royal Square because of the street names: King, Queen, Princess, and Duke Street. And of course, it's a square. So when we first started on King Street, it was these small properties on King Street that we were working with. And then Duke Street, of course, these larger properties that come the whole way behind the properties on King Street. So it's obvious why those are important. And then also want to point out these large parcels right to the east are also properties that we purchased along the way. It was a large industrial building and a bunch of dilapidated buildings there. And I'll come back to that and talk more about that in a minute. But on Duke Street, here's a picture of another property that obviously at one time was really a gorgeous, gorgeous building. And then we have the Allison's Bar, which was really a place to buy drugs or get shot, basically. And also this lovely building, which everyone lovingly referred to as basically the crack house. So especially these last two buildings that I just pointed out to you were buildings that we really needed to do something with. We needed to get rid of this nuisance bar. We needed to deal with this abandoned building here that crack addicts were living in. So back to the map, those are these buildings that are highlighted in gray here. So actually got together with Kevin Schreiber, who was at the time head of the Redevelopment Authority, and we cooked up a plan that the Redevelopment Authority would hold these properties for us if we were able to get control over them while we work on a development plan for the whole neighborhood. And they could also work with us in a fiduciary way to bring in grant money potentially for the project, for the purchase of the buildings, those types of things. And then Kevin and I actually approached Louis Appel, one of the fathers of York City and very wealthy individual. And we asked him for a grant to the Redevelopment Authority for $250,000 if we could get control over these properties, and that would go towards the purchase price. He agreed to do that, and that gave us the feeling that we could really get something done here. So at the time, Kevin and I both went to work trying to talk with the property owners and figure out what it was going to take to buy these properties. And at the same time, I actually worked on all of the property owners of these properties in between and convinced them to give me options to purchase their properties. So when finally we were able to work out deals to purchase Allison's Bar and the crack building, we also were able to execute those options and purchase the rest of the buildings on that half block. So today, this is what Duke Street looks like. You can see this vacant space here that has the parking is where the abandoned crack house was, because it was not something that could be renovated. And the rest of them we did some pretty major renovations on. This property on the corner, we felt that it was very important to have a cafe in this neighborhood, because how can you have a neighborhood without a cafe on the corner? So we pulled that together and made sure that these storefronts were filled with something creative and interesting. And this is actually the old Allison's Bar, which has become one of the coolest restaurants in all of York now, the Cantina. We actually cut out the glass block on the facade and put in a glass garage door. And in the rear, there's this amazing courtyard now that has been created between all of the properties that we've been able to control. And so there's outdoor dining for the Cantina, and there's some pretty major events that happen back here. It's pretty popular. Also, another, I think, really important piece of this is that we pushed the arts the entire time, and one of the most fun things we did, and also something that really helped us to brand this neighborhood, is we had a couple mural shows where we actually, over a weekend, brought in muralists from all over the world, actually, and we worked with some mural companies to do this, to do some amazing outdoor art. throughout Royal Square. And so now we have, I think, 20 some large murals in Royal Square, and people come from all over to see these. So while we were working on King and Duke Street, I mentioned earlier that we also purchased a large warehouse building, and that was on sanitary products. This building had been vacant for 7 years before we started working on Royal Square, and it's 40,000 square feet of just what could be something amazing. So after doing some real research, we figured out the only thing that really works well to revitalize an old building in an area where there's not a lot of walking traffic yet is an event venue, because it only takes one person to say, yeah, I want to have my event there, and they bring 300 people with them. So we actually renovated this building. You can see there, it was a $2 million historic renovation. We did get historic tax credits for this project, and we turned it into the Bond wedding and events building. So we host about 40 weddings a year in this space, and then a lot of community events as well. It's been a huge success. Also, on the back side of the building, in the alley, we actually leased a separate warehouse space to Collusion Tapworks, which has been an extremely successful brewery and bar, and has really livened up the neighborhood as well. So while we were working on Royal Square and it started to become obvious that this was successful, we started looking elsewhere in New York City too, and said, you know, the Market Street corridor is largely vacant and deteriorated. And this is a historic picture here. This used to be the shopping center of York. You can see the old Woolworth building is there in the distance, and then a couple other large shops, all the people. So then, of course, this is what it was looking like in 2014. Completely vacant. All of these spaces vacant, buildings deteriorated. And this is the old Woolworth building, which actually the Redevelopment Authority took control over this about 35 years ago. So we created a new market tax credit project for these buildings. It was actually a $15 million project. We utilized historic tax credits, new market tax credits, grants from foundations, and bank loans and private capital to do this renovation. So you can see all three of these buildings in a row were fully renovated. You can see the Woolworth building is still being renovated in this picture in the background. We actually added 2 stories with apartments in this building. The Timeline, we created the Timeline Arcade in the retail space in the middle, and this is what the Woolworth building looks like now. Leased the first floor to WellSpan. There's parking under in the rear, and 33 apartments here. And here's a view from the sky. So just a couple interesting facts. So in May of 2012, there was 279,000 square feet of vacant and blighted space on this block. And by the end of 2017, between our project and also the One Market Way West project that was spurred on from this development, there was 216,000 square feet of newly renovated and occupied space. Vacancy rate went from 45% to 10% on that block. So highly impactful project. And then here more recently, we decided to do a bookend project of 2 landmark properties, one on each side of the Central Business District. This is the Haynes building, which had been sitting deteriorated and vacant, except for H&R Block was there. And it was mostly 90% vacant for about 10 years. So we did a full renovation on this, a historic restoration to the exterior, historic tax credits, new market tax credits. There are 10 market rate beautiful apartments in this building, along with H&R Block State, and we have a Corey Leslie law firm in the first floor here too. And the other side of this project was the Dahl building. This is actually the original York Hotel that had fallen into massive disrepair. and the facade was actually peeling off and at risk of falling into the street. So this had to be done. So this is now 13 apartments, market rate apartments, with retail that we just leased on the first floor. And lastly, the Dahl building, the Rupp building. This is in the square. This is probably one of the most recognizable and beautiful buildings in all of downtown New York. This building had been also sitting in disrepair for 25 years. Maple Donuts, I think, moved out of the first floor about 18 years ago, and the other part of the first floor was vacant before that. Full renovation of this property, and this actually did not take many subsidies, surprisingly enough. I think the most important piece was we were able to get it at the right price. And we also brought some investors in because of where it's located that really wanted to invest in this property. So we created Prince Street Cafe York on the first floor of this building, which is a beautiful cafe. On the second floor, the Grotto co-working space, and above is additional office space that's leased. Lastly, I'll give you a sneak peek of what's next to come in York. These projects have been held up due to COVID issues, but this is the Northern Gateway, will be the Northern Gateway project. Right now, it's the deteriorated northern section of George Street, basically across from the Kodo building and the ball field. This encompasses all these buildings up to the Pullman building here. And so the plan is for it to look like this when we're done. And we have a major restaurant that's planning on going into this building, and then these will be turned into residential. And lastly, the old Cobblestones building. This was a really great venue and restaurant for a long time in York, but they went bankrupt about 6 years ago, and it's been shuttered ever since. We finally got control over it a couple of years ago, and we actually have a tenant to do a large-scale 1,000-cap music venue here, and this is the rendering. But of course, can't do a large-cap music venue right now with COVID, so that's on hold as well. So that's it. So I'll stop sharing here and go back to Mindy.
Thank you very much, Josh. Angie, I'll let you take it from here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. It doesn't look like I'm unmuted, but I'm glad I am. All right. So hello, everyone. Angie Williamson in Philly. And I feel like my mission is to make Mindy want to quit her job and come work with Jumpstart. So Jumpstart Germantown, can you guys see the screen? Yes. So yeah, I can't see you guys, but hopefully everything looks good. So yeah. Jumpstart Germantown.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Thank you. Started about 5 years ago with my boss, Ken Weinstein, who is a real estate developer here in Philadelphia for about 30 years. And he was getting tons of calls from folks that wanted to do what he does, which is social impact development. And he was working with them one-on-one, talking to them, meeting them for coffee, kind of, you know, they were picking his brain. And then he said, what if I just got a group of folks together, and instead of them just talking to me, they also get to meet my whole team, and they talk to my my attorney, my banker, my architect, my property manager, because it's, you know, the whole team that makes this work. So that's how he started Jumpstart Germantown. And so what is it? It's a training program, it's a developers network, and it's a loan program. And really what our mission is and how it's different from just any other you know, real estate development program, there's tons of them out there, is our philosophy. And, you know, we want to do well by doing good. So we're not just about getting rich quick. We're for aspiring developers that really want to make a difference in their community. So folks that are in, you know, the Germantown area go through our training program. They learn what we call the 7 jump steps of real estate development. And then hopefully they're going on and making a positive impact in their community. So as you can see here, our philosophy is reducing blight, improving our community with less gentrification. And the way we do that is we are scattered sites. So our folks, they're new developers. They're not doing, tearing down blocks and building new. They're doing one property at a time. Also growing the pie. So a large part of the Jumpstart community and our philosophy is sharing resources. So a lot of times developers kind of keep things close to their vest, and we want to make sure that we're sharing as much as we can about what our knowledge is. And then gaining community support by being a good neighbor. So we really stress the importance of talking to your community. Even if you live a few blocks away, you need to make sure that you are knocking on the doors next to the house that you're renovating, getting to know them. It can help you in many different ways. Also investing in your future. So yes, this is an impactful program, but we also want people to have this be a nest egg. So, keeping that wealth local and having folks, sometimes it's a hobby that they do this, but sometimes this can become their career and they can become full-time real estate developers. And then another tenet of ours is really changing the face of the development community. So in Philly, even though we're a very diverse community, the majority of developers are still white men. And the exciting thing about our program is that 85% of those that go through it are either people of color or women. So our training program, we are currently in our 22nd cohort. So tomorrow we graduate 160 people in our first ever virtual training program. Typically we meet 60 at a time in person, but this time it's different. So we're very excited. We really did not anticipate the training program to continue this long. We thought we would hit a wall and there wouldn't be the interest and the demand, but it just keeps on continuing. So we already have a fall program, or I'm sorry, a winter program lined up as well. And it's just amazing how many folks continue to apply. And the majority of the folks are hearing about it word of mouth from other people who have gone through the program. As I mentioned briefly, they learn what we call the 7 jump steps of real estate development. It's 12 to 15 hours of instruction. And then at the end of it, they are paired with a mentor that they get to work with one-on-one. We have about 31 volunteer mentors who have done at least 10 development projects that work with our graduates. Network. So in addition to training these aspiring real estate developers, we also want to make sure that they are building community with each other, that they are able to share those resources we talked about. That's how you grow the pie. So we started a developers network, which is basically an informal speaker series. Used to be in person, now also online. So we have weekly what we call Jumpinars, which is our webinar series that each week a different topic, a different speaker. And then we have an opportunity, for folks to ask questions and everything. But it's really, right now, it's more of continuing ed than networking. Hopefully, once we're back together, we'll be able to really do that networking part as well. And then our loan program, which is really where the biggest impact is made, at least visually. So to date, in our Jumpstart Germantown loan program, we have made 177 loans. $20 million. It's really, again, exceeded our expectations as far as how this has grown. And our average loan, as you can see, is pretty small. So it's $111,000. And so really what our program is geared towards is for those new developers who a regular bank, traditional financing really doesn't work for them. So maybe the loan amount's too small. They don't have a portfolio yet. So they can use our program to purchase a property and renovate it. We are strictly residential. We've done a couple of mixed use projects with some more experienced developers, but we're really focusing on those residential blighted properties in the neighborhood that need to be renovated so that new families can move in. So just a couple of photos of projects that our Jumpstarters have done. Couple of interior ones. And really, so how this, how could you do this in your neighborhood? And I will say one exciting thing about this program is that it has expanded. So we started Jumpstart Germantown 5 years ago, and about 3 years ago, we received funding from the Barra Foundation, and we worked with our Philadelphia LISC office to provide a basically a toolbox that other communities can use to start their own Jumpstart program. And so to date, we have had 6 other Jumpstart programs start in the city of Philadelphia. And we've also just had, just recently, 2 have started outside of Philadelphia. We now have Jumpstart Norristown, and just this week, Jumpstart Williamson in Delaware started up. So we're really excited to see that this model is able to be replicated in other places. So I will say one issue with that is the loan program. So all of these other Jumpstart programs have been able to do really great successful training programs and speaker series, developer networking. But to date, the loan program has only expanded to one of those other Jumpstart programs. And so the financing, can be tough. We were able to start our loan program because our president took out a personal line of credit. However, now we've shown success. And so we actually were able to receive a loan, a $3 million loan from the Reinvestment Fund, which is a local CDFI here, and use that money to provide loans for the other Jumpstart neighborhoods in the Philadelphia area. We hope that, as our success grows, the other Jumpstart programs can also bring on their own funding to do their own loan program, because that's really how this program can grow is by having your own loan program. But for now, we'll continue to provide those loans for those areas. But I think in other communities, partnering up with developers who are like-minded, partnering with CDFIs, it is very possible, to have a loan program and provide these sorts of financing for aspiring real estate developers. So other exciting things just in our Jumpstart sphere, we also created a co-working space in our new office. Our president, Ken Weinstein, also not a stranger to preservation projects. He redeveloped an old school and built in the 1850s, and it's now our offices. And on the first floor, created a Jumpstart Germantown co-working space. Of course, right now it's pretty quiet, but the idea is that folks who are in this real estate world, sometimes just starting out and need a place to kind of network, but also have their office can use that space. It's also been great for us to use for as a venue for our programs. And then we also, the Jumpinards I talked about in the mini training sessions. So realizing that not everyone is going to learn what they need to in that 12 hours of our training program. It's just a very small amount. We want to continue that education and allow people to really just keep learning and keep growing. So we offer those every week. And then we also started a couple years ago a Jumpstart Philly real estate radio show where we have speakers come on, talk about different topics. And we also have that available as a podcast. And then the Jumpstart Philly loan program is that expansion where we are able to provide the similar acquisition and construction loans for folks in the other Jumpstart areas. And then coming up soon, we are having Jumpstart 2.0, where folks who have already done 10 or so residential developments and are ready to take that next step into commercial, we're providing a commercial training, real estate training program for them. And that is all I have right now, but excited to answer questions later.
Thank you very much, Angie. David, I'll turn it over to you. David, I think you're muted.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So I think this session could be called All About York and All About Money. I'll say one thing here is, and you can't see my screen, right? Thumbs up. There we go. So my model is not a one and done, just like everybody else here. We all seem to be serial preservationists or rehabbers. We continue to do a project and get excited to do another. I would say to bring the York connection in, at age 14, I was an intern with the York County Historical Society. One day, somebody came in and robbed something. When I asked the executive director why that could happen, he said, because we're a nonprofit and don't have any money. And at that tender age of 14, I decided nonprofits had a problem. They needed money. And I think my career ever since has been working for nonprofits that realized money ran everything, made everything happen. So you're going to see that as kind of an undercurrent throughout my presentation. If I didn't already, I am president and CEO of the Progress Fund. I'm co-founder. It is a community development financial institution, just like TRF that Angie was talking about. We started it because we needed money to do the kind of preservation and rehab projects we wanted to see out in Western Pennsylvania. I mentioned personal stuff. I'll also tell you, because a lot of the things you'll hear from your kind of personal opinion from maybe war wounds, is that I worked in Bellefonte, PA, in Center County as a intern with the Historical Survey. I was the property manager for Pittsburgh History and Landmarks when they developed it, Station Square in Pittsburgh. Moved to Seattle area and was a Main Street manager for 4 years. Also worked in Seattle on community development in downtown. I eventually came back and became a grant manager for Preservation Pennsylvania under a federal program for the Southwestern Pennsylvania Heritage Preservation Commission. I see that Brian Van Sweden's on this, viewing this, and a shout out and say hi, Brian. I've been working with him for a while. And then on to the Progress Fund. So that's kind of my career. The slides, well, I should, before I even get into that, let's go to one slide. So this is our model. The Progress Fund that we started about 22 years ago is all about small business. We, as I said, formed it, and we became a nonprofit lender and developer. That's what we're doing now. We recognize that historic assets attract customers and downtown save communities. But many of the projects that we wanted to see happen didn't have money, so we started our own bank. As a lender, we recognize that these projects have to have a market so that customers come in the door to pay the businesses, so the businesses can pay the landlord. And so we are always on there focusing and finding market first and always. We do not find historic buildings, fall in love with them, and then try to find a market. We kind of work the other way around. We also don't do pure preservation. We're rehabbers. Preservation kind of was false prophet to me because you spend so much time getting it perfect. I like buildings to be reused and adapted for the future. And the other thing we've done is small projects. Get the project open, make sure it stays successful, and then repeat another small project. And finally, we win some and we lose more. And what I mean is we say a no to a lot of projects that come to us. People want to borrow money to do a project, and we say no because we don't think back to market, there's enough of a market. And so we say no a lot, both as a lender and as a developer. And it's kept us to be able to have some of the successes that we've been able to enjoy. So let me see here. So here's some projects, just to give you an idea of what we did after starting a bank. These are the kind of projects that people would approach us and ask to do. In this case, a historic house, the nicest one in Myersdale, Pennsylvania, which is has a customer's base of the riders on the Great Allegheny Passage, and it's a weekend B&B, does very well. We help them get going. Sorry, I'm just a little technical glitch here. Another one, also Great Allegheny Passage. If you're not familiar, that's that 150-mile trail from Cumberland, Maryland to Pittsburgh. It runs through many small towns that had disinvestment and didn't know what to do for their new future. And so the Great Allegheny Passage were bringing hundreds of thousands of people past their businesses, but they weren't taking advantage of it. So if anybody wanted to do a historic project in a historic building, rehab it, and market to these trail users, we were on it. B&B, when the trail terminates in downtown Pittsburgh, somebody did a hostel in a beautiful old historic building. Something not on the trail, but this building was deconstructed and moved to Pennsylvania from Chicago. It is a Frank Lloyd Wright Usonian house. It was taken apart piece by piece and rebuilt piece by piece. Usually banks don't fund projects where you tear a building apart. They usually like to, that's like the worst thing. They want to get it already done. The Jean Benet Tavern, nearly 300-year-old property along the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It had been closed. It had become a nuisance bar. They were caught serving underage folks, shut down, and a couple came in and said, we want to do something with it. Very successful. The owner of Kentuck Knob, British Lord, came to us and said, I want to borrow some money to open the Frank Lloyd Wright property, Kentuck Knob, to the public. So we funded that. These are all projects that were, well, the reason we were approached is PNC would not lend them money because they don't do historic homes like this. So they came to us as an alternative lender. So I pointed out the recreational market of the Great Allegheny Passage. So we basically, as the lender, looked for businesses that would recognize the opportunity at their front door, hungry bicyclists, thirsty bicyclists, people that wanted to sleep inside, not in a tent, and leave happily in the morning. So this was the market we funded, and it allowed us to do a lot in these small towns. So, okay, so we got, how should I say, what's the word? We got tired of waiting, I'll put it that way, for businesses to show up. And we decided as a nonprofit to become a real estate developer ourselves. There were empty buildings. So if you look in the upper right corner, you see the Riverside Lodge had deteriorated into basically an empty, unused building. It had been a nice corner store on a very important corner in this small town of West Newton, Pennsylvania. In the upper left, the historical shot. So got a rendering and went out and we actually did this project as a spec building and had no tenant. We kept our fingers crossed, but eventually got 30 people that came to us that wanted to move into the place. Why could we do it? Because we had already been lending money fiercely all along the Great Allegheny Passage. We had seen the success of the businesses that we had helped to get started and felt comfortable that we would be able to find a tenant. So the tenant came to us, Subway, and we have a 20-year lease with Subway. They keep signing 5-year leases. We did this with other people's money. And I know that money is always the question in preservation, how you do it. We had built the track record of those loans to all those small businesses enough that we could go to a foundation and say, we want to do a transformational project. We know the market, here's the numbers, help us do this project. And that's how this one in particular was funded. So we took on a few more projects. So on this left picture, on the before, you'll look down, you'll see a string of 4 single-family homes. These are directly across from the trailhead of the Great Allegheny Passage in West Newton. They put a, it's the entrance, if you would, to the community. It's a reconstructed visitor center, built exactly the way the original train station was. But it was a bunch of dilapidated buildings across the street after there was this public investment. So working with the one B&B that's in the row, that white house, the second house, they were operating as a B&B with the dilapidated house to the right, the gray one, an empty house beyond them, and the blue roofed house in the far distance, if you can see it, was equally dilapidated. But we came in and worked with them. So now all four of these homes are part of the B&B. So it went from a one-room B&B now to a 14-room B&B in separate houses. And we did one at a time and moved on. Here's a before and after of the other. The one with the American flag, I didn't get the total before. We tore the porch off because it was already falling down before I could take the picture. But as you can see, it was the other B&B corner. So the other thing, the dirty little secret, is I believe in demo. I heard, I think, Angie talk about blight removal. This is the before picture. If you look on the left, if you know, anybody knows Myersdale, Pennsylvania, that's a historic train station. Right on the other side is the Great Allegheny Passage. Thousands of people riding by, getting their first glimpse of this community, and you can't quite see it. Those two buildings, the yellow and the gray one, are, pardon me, I'm a card-carrying preservationist. I know what I speak. They were not salvageable economically. We bought them both. We gave the people that we moved out opportunities to find other better housing, and we tore them down and created a development parcel. So sometimes getting rid of stuff is helpful. Another project that we did, it's not always money. The house, pardon me, the storefront in front of you is in Laughlintown in eastern Westmoreland County. That building had been vacant for about 25 years. People wanted to buy it. The problem was that the owner, who was incarcerated for life for murder, was a little hard to cut a deal with. The other thing is they had signed a conservation easement on the property that was a catch-22, would not allow you to do what was now what you need to do 25 years later, which is run it as a business. The conservation easement said that only somebody could live in the building and operate it as a store. Kind of a impossible thing nowadays. So working with the conservation, was Western Pennsylvania, I'm forgetting their exactly name, the Western Pennsylvania Cultural, Mindy, maybe you know, but I'm forgetting their name for the moment, sorry. They worked with us, and we rewrote the conservation easement. We were able to turn it into a going concern, which of course you need to celebrate. And ever since, it's been run as a store. So sometimes it's money, sometimes it's legal issues. And finally, Josh mentioned, he said, what's up next? So I'll give you that one for us too. In Hazelwood, the Hazelwood neighborhood of Allegheny County, we stumbled into the old Hazelwood Brewery. We had a brewer that wanted to come to us and get a loan, and we were working with him to find a building, and then he found this building. He went away, but we loved the building so much, we decided to take it on as a project starting in 2017. And that's what it's going to become. Matter of fact, construction starts here in October. The one-time gravity-fed historic Hazelwood Brewery, which was like one brewer in one building, is now going to be 3 craft brewers, each taking one of those bays. You can see this large garage doors, white garage doors, and all 3 of them will be in one place. It will be a destination for the craft brewery industry in Pittsburgh. This is what the back of the building looks like after we got rid of all the junk. And now when you go there, you can sit down in the courtyard on the ground, enter the back garage doors to buy a beer, which is where all the brewing will be on the ground floor. take the stairs or the elevator up to the third floor. You can see the glass wall on the left, and there'll be tasting rooms in there, and you can grab a drink and go up onto the roof deck and look out over a lot of Pittsburgh. So we've saved the historic brewery and remade it into a triple brewery. So to pull it all together, so what have our successes been? Small businesses are our partners. If I can, Josh uses small business tenants to make it happen. I learned early that museums are not the way to go. Trying to protect buildings by not by doing anything but putting customers, I should say businesses that make money, I think is heresy. Sorry for those that don't, but I don't want to struggle for money. Our projects make money after we open, and then they pay for themselves. The other thing we did is after six different jobs in preservation, we went out and got our own money. We got tired of begging, and we do beg for grants, but as a lender, we have money to put into projects that we want to put in. And we souped it up by becoming not only a lender, but a developer. As a lender, we're always focused first on the market and always on the market. That's what pays the bills. In our case, we use tourism because in rural Pennsylvania, that's one of the few things we have as an attractor. Brings people out to enjoy the country, and they want to do things, including imbibe. And so booze is what pays the bill sometimes. So we do a lot of craft beverage work. We decided to do rehabs, not preservation. We are doing one Tax Act project, but the rest you see are not Tax Act. And we decided to do small projects so we could get them done and continue to do others. I think probably everybody knows this, but success attracts more money. The success that we have had in projects, in our case, has brought more foundation money, and in other cases, bring more investors, because investors want to invest in successful projects. So it's better to have a few small projects than try to swing and hit the biggest home run. And again, we win some, but we lose a lot more. We don't care. We want to be able to say no to projects and move on to ones we know we can have an impact.